What's going on, Clutch Crew sports fans? It's Zach back here, and this is our first episode after the Christmas break. I've got Nate and Connor on the line. I'm actually live in person with Nate. We're recording together. Connor, of course, coming through you guys through Skype. How you guys doing tonight?
Pretty good. Got
Yeah,
some college football on the TV, so
yeah, we're starting to get into actual bowl season now with some good bowl matchups. So that's definitely some stuff to look forward to. We got on Saturday the college football playoff games, which only one of them is going to be a good game, but I think it's going to be a really good game. I mean, the Oklahoma LSU is going to be a blowout, but
Yeah.
Clemson Ohio State's going to be fun because that could go either way, really.
well, we saw that Eric did differ from us. He picked Ohio State, so
He did. So,
but he still picked LSU in the final, so we're pretty much in consensus, except for Eric on the Clemson Ohio State game.
yeah.
Yeah.
But America as a whole is like divided on that game. So,
It'll be interesting.
Well,
Yeah.
I saw that I saw an interesting map actually of like which state was rooting for who, and it was like most states were rooting for Oklahoma. It was like 20 some states were rooting for Oklahoma, and then like kind of two less than that, like 20 something were rooting for Ohio State, and then like 7 for LSU and like 3 for Clemson.
that's kind of weird. I would have thought there'd be more LSU since they haven't been in the national conversation.
Yeah.
You know, they're
Yeah.
not like Clemson. I can understand why people are tired of Clemson.
Well, I thought it was interesting for Clemson. Like, of course, North Carolina and South Carolina were like rooting for Clemson, but then it was like Minnesota or something was the other state
Yeah.
that was rooting for Clemson. I was like, what?
There's always some weird state. Like South Carolina gets like a lot of Texans fans now since Deshaun Watson's on with the Texans. It's weird how like, but that's a totally Minnesota has no relation at all. So that's a weird one. Yeah, but that is fascinating to hear. So we have some miscellaneous sports topics to cover with you guys today. Now they are all going to be NFL related. So I'll just preview all the topics now. So I'm going to start out talking about Jameis Winston, and he's really an interesting situation, which is why I made him his own topic. And then Nate is going to talk about the Cowboys season. Obviously, they still have a slight chance to make the playoffs. They got to have a couple things happen this week. But he's going to talk about their season being like a disappointment so far. And then Connor is going to talk about Antonio Brown with this latest report where he's being worked out by the Saints. So all of these are NFL topics, but they're all different. They're all going to be pretty interesting to hear about. So I'll move on and talk about Jameis Winston to start out with. And Jameis Winston has been such a weird quarterback because just like a month ago when we were recording this podcast, we were going through each team and talking about, are they going to have their returning starting quarterback, a new starting quarterback, or is it to be determined? And I remember we put the Buccaneers on the definitely going to have a new quarterback. But since that time span, Jameis Winston, I think, had 2 or 3 like 500-yard games and like 4 touchdowns and stuff. And the Bucs have been winning as of recently. They lost last week to the Texans. It was a really close game, but you look here at the screen and you see these stats with Peyton Manning, and I did see this. This is through 13 games, so this isn't that far away. And I know Peyton Manning at age 25 had probably played less NFL seasons than Jameis at age 25, but it's still, looking at these numbers, I mean, it's kind of crazy how like similar they are in all of these stats. Like all of them are really within like 1 or 2 points of each other. I mean, even the passing yards are so close together, and they're obviously the same age. And we know what Peyton Manning ended up being. I'm not saying that this graphic means Jameis Winston's going to have the career that Peyton Manning had with 2 Super Bowls, and all that stuff, but it's insane but true. That's the title here for the CBS Sports graphic. And so like I said before, if you'd have told me a month ago, I just said Jameis Winston's gone. He's going to be some backup on another team. But after the kind of stats that he's put up now, obviously the thing that's really holding him back are the interceptions. That's been his problem his entire career. And I know
I think I saw a meme that was something like, "Get you a girl that looks at you like how Jameis looks at his primary receiver."
Yeah, I mean, I will say the Bucks, they throw a lot. I mean, they are probably the most passing team in the league, and he does take chances and he does throw some bad interceptions. He also throws some that are probably shouldn't be interceptions because it's the wide receiver's fault. But I always say when it comes to that stuff, I've seen Bucks fans on Twitter be like, "Oh, look at this interception that wasn't Jameis's fault," but then I can point to an instance where a DB dropped a potential interception. So those usually balance each other out. You know what I mean? Like they're always like, "Oh, it's the wide receiver's fault," but then earlier in that game he threw one that like the safety just flat out dropped. So it's like they cancel each other out, I think.
Yeah.
And it's way too many. It's way too many to win with. But the thing is he's got Byron Leftwich as his offensive coordinator, and I mean, people have been saying Byron Leftwich is like he's going to be the next hot head coach for somebody. He's risen through the ranks. He's gone from quarterback coach to offensive coordinator in like the span of like 2 years. It seems like just a couple of years ago he was playing for the Steelers as a backup. Even.
I know, man.
So,
I miss him. I wish he was still our backup right now.
That'd be interesting to see how they would have done. But yeah, so he's got that working for him. Bruce Arians, he's had success with quarterbacks. He turned Carson Palmer's career around in Arizona. He worked with, I think, Peyton Manning in Indy. So he's Ben Roethlisberger, I think, in Pittsburgh. So he's had some success with quarterbacks that later end up having really good careers. And it's interesting because Jameis's contract is up this year, and there's so many possibilities that can happen with Jameis Winston. There's the franchise tag possibility, but then you get the curveball of the media report recently that said that Jameis Winston is seeking $30 million a year, and he's not going to play for a franchise tag. So it's kind of crazy that we're going from a guy that just a month ago it seems like wasn't going to be the starter next season, and then Tampa was going to draft the heir apparent, to now asking for $30 million, and if they franchise tag him, he's not going to play. How serious is that threat? I don't know. But we're gonna have to figure this stuff out as time moves along. But it's so crazy. And then so he could obviously just hit the market as an unrestricted free agent, and then all bets are off where he goes. And Nate's going to talk about the Cowboys in another minute here, but I've been seeing on Twitter some people talking about could Jameis, because Dak isn't signed by the Cowboys. Could the Cowboys end up signing Jameis Winston next year? That'd be
interesting.
That would be wild.
Hey, well, Jameis wants $30 million and Dak wants $40 million, so you go with the lesser of the two.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a lot of money, I think, for Jameis, but it's going to be interesting to see because I think he has shown that he can be a starting quarterback. I think he can be a really good quarterback. It's the interceptions that really have plagued him. And I think that is going to cost him when it comes to negotiating. But I mean, I think he's got so much talent and so much potential that he's going to get paid. And it started out looking like, okay, maybe he's just going to get like a 1-year prove it deal. I think he's playing on his 5th-year option this year, so it would have to be something else. But he would just get like a 1-year prove it deal. But we're going to see. It's going to be interesting what happens with him. And I think. And I said this on Twitch and got some interesting reactions from some other NFC South fans of other teams. But I really do think that if Jameis comes back to the Buccaneers next year, that this team has the potential and I think the real likelihood of winning the NFC South. When you look at this defense, all of their defense is flooded with rookies or second-year players. I mean, Devin White, obviously, middle linebacker, is a rookie, but they've also got Jamel Dean. I'm forgetting the name of one of their other guys.
Vita Vea at nose tackle.
Oh yeah, he's not in the secondary, but he's a second-year player, and virtually it's his rookie year because he basically missed every game last year. He's been really good.
Well, and I think Vernon Hargraves is only a 4th-year player, isn't he?
No, they cut Vernon Hargraves. Actually,
I thought he was still there.
No, they cut him, and I don't remember who picked him up, but I think he's out of there.
There's some Carlton Davis. That's the name I'm thinking.
That's
of.
right.
Yeah, he's been really good for them in the secondary. But But yeah, they did cut Hargraves because he was a bit of a bust.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless, though, their secondary is flooded with all of these young players that I think are just going to get better as the year goes, as next season comes around. Todd Bowles has already done a really good job with that defense. Looking at what it was last year, I mean, they've been able to win some of their games because of their defense. Jameis will have like 4 interceptions in a game, but since the defense has gotten so much better, they'll like stop the other team from scoring on like 2 of those turnovers. So I mean, Tampa's had a chance to win. If you look at their schedule, I know they lost in Seattle because of a missed field goal that they had. They lost to the Tennessee Titans because of blown whistle called on it was like a Miles Jack wasn't down type of a play where they would have scooped and scored, but the ref blew a whistle, and that ended up costing them the Titans game. And if they'd won those 2 games, I mean, hey, who knows? I know the NFC's loaded this year, but they might have been able to sneak in ahead of Minnesota for a playoff spot. So, and especially they would have been playing more motivated against Houston last week. They were already eliminated at that point, but it goes to say that this Buccaneers team has definitely had a better season than all of us predicted. And Jameis has thrown 23 interceptions and 5 pick sixes. I mean, it's remarkable to think that you can have this bad of an interception number, but still be winning games. And this offense is so high powered. I mean, Mike Evans and Godwin are a great duo. You got OJ Howard in the middle. Perriman's fast. He can run and catch. This offense.
I will say OJ Howard though has been I remember I drafted him in fantasy. He's been a huge disappointment.
He has been a bust on the season, but as of lately, he's way underused. That's the system that Arians runs. But as the last couple of weeks, they've been getting him involved a lot more. So, and he's definitely got talent. So they don't really have a great running back there, but they've got 2 that are workable, I guess, and Ronald Jones and Peyton Barber. So the Buccaneers are going to be interesting. Jameis is going to be interesting. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this turns out because are the Bucs going to overpay for him and is he going to end up busting? I'm serious. Is he just playing out of his mind right now and then going to get a huge contract that's undeserving, or is he going to get severely underpaid and end up being like a Ryan Tannehill where he maybe goes to a team as a backup and then ends up starting and then doing really well like Tannehill's done? There's just so many possibilities with Winston. It's kind of crazy, but he's definitely, I personally think he's in line for a big payday. You know, these quarterbacks, you don't even have to be good. You just have to have potential and they'll pay you. So I think the Bucs are going to be in win mode now next year, win now mode next year because the team's gone so long. They're like one of only 2 NFL teams to not go to the playoffs in this decade. So they need to, the other being the Cleveland Browns, they really need to get it together. I think next year is going to be their year, and I do think Jameis will come back. I don't think he'll get what he's asking for, but we'll see. I mean, he could just be calling the bluff with the whole franchise tag thing. A lot of players do that. It's going to be interesting to see how the Bucs test him with that because the Bucs can say that, hey, you've had off the field issues, which he has had, to try and lower his price tag a little bit. But I want to hear what you guys think. Do you guys think he can be a great quarterback? Obviously not Peyton Manning caliber. That's not what I'm saying. But I think he can be. I think he can be a great quarterback because, I mean, Peyton had virtually the same stats at the same age as Jameis Winston. So
your Norton subscription got canceled.
Yeah.
that's Nate's computer. So
yeah.
Everybody go hack Nate now. Yeah. So what do you guys think though? Seriously, what do you guys think about him?
I think I agree with you that he could be a great quarterback. Obviously, you see his numbers and I believe he's still top 5 in the NFL in passing yards.
He's number 1 actually.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's been slinging it and he's got a bunch of touchdowns. But right now he either has or he's on pace for a 30-30 season, 30 touchdowns and 30 picks.
It's like me and Madden.
That is, yeah.
Or actually, more realistically, me. That was our last season in Madden. I had 53 touchdowns, but 33 interceptions for Cam Newton.
Yeah, which those are preposterous numbers. You never see those. But I don't know. I think definitely the talent, the arm, and his mobility and all the physical traits are there, but I just don't know if the decision making is at an elite level. And I don't know. I mean, he's been in the NFL like 5 years now, and he hasn't really shown any improvement in that area. And so I don't know what his market's gonna be for another team because looking around the NFL, I don't see any team that needs a quarterback that's gonna have a better situation for him than in Tampa with Bruce Arians and Leftwich. That was good of an offensive kind of a couple offensive minds leading the show that you're gonna find around the league, and he's got
the weapons too.
Yeah, you're throwing at Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Pretty much anywhere else is gonna be, a downgrade. Obviously, speaking of the teams that need a quarterback, not the Saints or whatever. But so I don't know. I think if Jameis Winston's gonna become a great quarterback, it's gonna be the situation in Tampa Bay. So I don't know. I think the $30 million is pretty steep to ask for, considering some of the other options out there right now. They're definitely gonna be cheaper. Like you can get Teddy Bridgewater, you can draft a quarterback, all that. So I think he's gonna sign in Tampa Bay for less than $30 million. Be my prediction. And if he does sign somewhere else, I think he will end up becoming a bust and probably being out of there in less than 2 years.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
I mean, my thing with Winston is that, or at least when it comes to the Bucs and like his contract, the problem for the Bucs right now is that they thought they were going to have a really bad year, so that way okay, if you go like 4-12, 5-11, you're going to have a a good draft pick or something like that. But they're going to end the season I mean, who are they? I can't remember who they're playing the last week. They're playing Atlanta, I think.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're going to finish like 7-9, 8-8, which unfortunately that kind of puts you in no man's land. My dad always likes to talk about the Bills. The Bills have never been good enough to make the playoffs, but they've never sucked bad enough to get a really good draft pick. Yeah. So that's kind of where the Buccaneers are in right now. So, drafting a quarterback is probably out of the question, given some of the teams that are going to be ahead of them, like Cincinnati and Miami and possibly Oakland. Well, Oakland might not be ahead of them, but maybe Denver and the Chargers, some of these teams that might be looking for quarterbacks, all the quarterbacks are going to be gone. So, and I don't know what Tampa Bay's cap situation is like how much.
I know it's not good.
No.
Yeah, I know they're at the bottom of cap space. So
okay, so they don't have a lot of cap room next year. So because my thought was, I think Jameis is kind of he's kind of playing out of his mind right now because everybody was talking going into this year. When you hear those rumors and those people talking like, oh, this is like a prove it year. Like if he doesn't do good, then he's going to go out. That's going to be it for him. So I think that actually kind of got to him, and he used that as motivation this year. But if he gets some kind of a contract, especially if he gets a $30 million contract, I think he's going to kind of pull like what a Ryan Fitzpatrick did in Buffalo. All of a sudden he was showing some promise, and Buffalo was starting to come back on the rise. And then they gave Ryan Fitzpatrick a huge contract, and he just, morphed into the Ryan Fitzpatrick that we all know and love today. So I think that'll happen with Winston. If they give him a big contract, I think he's going to bust, even in the Tampa Bay situation. I mean, obviously Chris Godwin is like a new addition, but the Buccaneers still don't have a running game. And, he had been throwing to Mike Evans for a long time, and that wasn't working. So, and again, if you keep throwing, 30 interceptions on the season, that's an easy way to, get yourself knocked out of the playoff race. So, I mean, it'll be interesting. I'm definitely not on Zach's train of that they're going to win the NFC South next year. I still think the Saints are far and away a better team, even if Drew Brees retires. But it'll be interesting to say the least. I'm also in agreement with Nate that if he goes somewhere else, he's not going to do anything. I don't know if he'll be out of, in 2 years, but I feel like he'll get benched, at some point. He'll be downgraded to backup at some point for another team, especially if it's one of these teams like Cincinnati or Miami that's going to have a young quarterback. They're going to bench him in favor of the young quarterback.
Yeah, if I was him, I would not be looking to go for that. I mean, if he's gonna do that, he's gonna become the next Sam Bradford, Ryan Fitzpatrick, guy moved from team to team for
gonna
20
make tons of money, going on these 1-year contracts,
and then get benched in week 6. You go 1-5. Like, so I don't see that happening for him. I think if he does leave Tampa, it would be if the Cowboys can't re-sign Dak. That could be a possibility. Could be Chicago. Could be Carolina, maybe. That'd be kind of weird, but could be.
I think if I was a team though looking for a quarterback and I wasn't going to draft one, I don't know what you guys think.
Like, could he be the next Nick Foles? Like, and get
but I think in this market, I almost feel like teams would rather go after Teddy Bridgewater as a free agent than Jameis Winston. Because I think a lot of teams see the potential that Bridgewater's did pretty good in a few starts, and they're going to want to sign him for a little bit less money.
Okay.
That would.
Yeah.
I see the bigger market.
Well, that's the thing. It depends on if Drew Brees retires or not, right? Because if Drew Brees retires, I feel like the Saints are going to break the bank to try and bring Teddy Bridgewater back.
Right.
Because they saw how he did this year. But yeah, if Drew Brees doesn't retire, then I do agree that someone's going to try and get him for a little bit less. But I think Jameis would especially in Dallas, I feel like he would fail if he went to Dallas. I mean, you see Dallas, they're already, they're already failing, because Dak Prescott's near the top of the league in passing yards too.
Right,
and they're still, he's like top 3 right now, and they're still doing. I mean, Ezekiel Elliott's having a really off year this year. Mm-hmm. So, and if Ezekiel Elliott's not playing well, then we've seen what happens to that team without them. Which I know we're going to get to that in a second. But
you're going to lead into that.
But. So, yeah, I feel like the Cowboys would be the end of Jameis Winston.
Okay.
Speaking of them boys.
We them boys!
Yeah. Talking about the Cowboys now. Kind of the train wreck this season has been. They're 7-8 right now, which on paper is not that bad. But when you look around the roster, you got guys like Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, Amari Cooper, Leighton Vander Esch and Sean Lee on the defense. They've got some big names, definitely got talent across the board. And this season, pretty much by all accounts, by anyone who watches football, has been a mess. They've won the easy games versus the Redskins, versus Miami, versus the teams they should beat. But when it comes down to teams like a division rival that you've got to win versus the Eagles in December that we saw last time, they kind of just fall on their face. And I think there's a few causes to the problems here. Obviously, like the first one everyone wants to point at is Jason Garrett, which I would agree with. I've been saying for there you go. You got a nice picture of him having a pretty confused face, which seems to be.
I'm surprised he's not clapping in this picture.
Right. Team goes 3 and out. Better clap.
Good job. Guys.
Yeah, good job, guys. Good hustle. I've been saying for years that he, should have been fired just because the team never seems to improve. They made the playoffs a couple times. They lose in the first round. They're always around 8 or 9 wins. I think he squandered a lot of talent from Tony Romo to Dez Bryant to now Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott. I just never see any improvement. Not really any creativity. They just never seem to win the big games, which I know it's kind of a vague thing to say, but if you look at their record, they had, across the past few years, they just don't win when it counts. He just does just enough to kind of scrape by and not get fired. Maybe he'll be better next season. They keep him around. But I think this is the year that Jerry Jones finally has had enough. You've seen the shots of him the last few games kind of leaving the press box all like upset and like can't watch anymore. And I think not to be morbid or whatever, but he is kind of getting older. And I think in his mind, he's kind of tired of this and he wants to, have the Cowboys at least relevant, at least compete for a Super Bowl before, he obviously is, not able to be owner anymore. So I think he's tired of it and going to make a move, get rid of Jason Garrett. I know he's letting him play out the rest of the season, but I think even if they make the playoffs somehow, if Philly loses this week and they win their game, I think Jason Garrett's out of Dallas. And the other problem is, I'm going to talk about Dak Prescott now. He's having a good year. Mentioned his stats. He's in top 3 in passing, but he's kind of in the same boat as Garrett for me. he doesn't show up when it counts. Like you saw his game on Sunday, and there are a few passes that Michael Gallup dropped, one or two passes that he should have had. One of them would have been a touchdown, which I definitely feel for Dak on that play. But there are a few other big plays, third downs that he just could not get anybody open and couldn't make the. There were a few that he couldn't make the pass. They were open. He just overthrew them, underthrew them, whatever. There's some where he just couldn't find somebody open, and he's another one where if you look at his stats all year, I have them pulled up off of. There we go, off of Pro Football Reference, and you can kind of go down the list and you can see like, oh yeah, he lit it up versus the Giants and Washington, Miami, had a killer passer rating. Then you look at lost to New Orleans, it scored 10 points. He had a passer rating of 73, no touchdowns, one pick. You go down to the loss versus the Jets, threw 278 yards, which is good, but no touchdowns, passer rating of 89, which is pretty mediocre. Go down to loss versus the Pats. Obviously, that was a rainy game, bad conditions, but passer rating of 64. It's not great, and the passer rating of 74. A solid 260 yards, but no touchdowns at all for that offense on Sunday. So I think it's kind of hard for me to. I won't say Dak is a bad quarterback. I won't say he's like a bust at all. Obviously, he's had some great moments so far as a quarterback for the Cowboys, but I think you compare him to what Carson Wentz is doing in Philly with how bad those receivers have been. He's going out there, and they haven't. It hasn't always been pretty, but he's going out and making plays. He's making stuff happen on his own. I haven't seen that from Dak this year. I mean, I like him. I think he's a good leader. Everything I've seen about him, he's a good guy. But I think he needs to step it up next year. He's still obviously safe. I think his job is not in danger. But for the Cowboys to take advantage of their talent, they have to really get more out of Dak, I think, when it counts. And then the last thing to touch on is, this kind of goes back to Garrett, but they need to use Zeke even more, I think. Last Sunday, I don't know if I can find his touches last Sunday. I'll probably go to, there we go. That's a better way to do it. Box score. Yeah, 13 carries for 47 yards for Zeke. Receptions. 7 catches for 37 yards. So, that's 20 touches, which it's solid, but you go around the league and look at some other of the premier running backs, and that's really not that much. When you got a quarterback when the rest of your offense is kind of struggling, you got to give a guy like Zeke the ball a lot more, which that's been another kind of gripe of mine versus Jason Garrett. I had Zeke in fantasy a couple years back, and there are a lot of games where he is not to be that guy, but give my guy the ball a little bit more. You got a premier running back, and I think Zeke's gonna. Obviously he's the type of guy. I think he'll go wherever the most money. I don't know. He already got paid, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. Never
That's why they
mind.
can't pay Dak, because they
Yeah.
make all that money.
Very good.
I agree with you, man.
Yeah, that's what I think. They got to use Zeke more going forward, and Dak's got to, I think, step up in the big moments. I think he's a fine quarterback. He just got to make those, 2 or 3 throws a game that, that Tom Brady and Drew Brees and even Aaron Rodgers, come through and make. He's got to step up and make those now. So I think kind of to round it out for me, and then I'll let you guys kind of add on your thoughts. But I think they got to fire Garrett and bring in a more creative head coach. I don't know if Urban Meyer would come out of retirement to coach the Cowboys, or if they can get someone like, I don't know if Byron Leftwich is ready for the head coaching job yet, but someone more creative and aggressive on offense, defense, trying to show feed Zeke, which should be a lot easier than the Cowboys make it seem like it is, and then just for Dak to step up in next year and show why he's worth $40 million a year. So I'll let you guys kind of.
Yeah, Connor, you can start out.
Okay. It's been a huge disappointment for the Dallas Cowboys this year. I do agree. I think they should have. I'm sure Cowboys fans will agree too. They should have fired Jason Garrett like 2 or 3 seasons ago. But they always talk about how Jerry Jones likes his yes man, to be there. Because, that's the reason why Jimmy Johnson got fired, because even though, they won 2 Super Bowls with Jimmy Johnson started going against Jerry Jones, and Jerry didn't like that because it's Jerry's world. So that's why they fired Jimmy Johnson. But Jason Garrett's always kind of been the, yes, sir, yes, master, I'll do whatever you want with Jerry Jones. So, that's why Jerry Jones keeps him around. But it's finally, I do think you're right. It's finally going to be the year that Jason Garrett gets fired. If they don't, then it'll be probably one of the biggest shocks of the offseason if they don't fire him. Kind of like a couple seasons ago when we all thought that Cincinnati was going to fire Marvin Lewis, but they extended him, and everybody was like, what? Why did you do that? Which then, they finally eventually fired him. But, and then, I think going forward, they need to give Zeke the ball more. I know Zeke's had a disappointing year, but the guy didn't, lead the league in rushing twice to, all of a sudden them not give him the ball enough. And, I've always known this about Dak Prescott, that, because people and all the Dallas Cowboys fans are talking about, he's like the greatest, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But then you constantly see him throughout the game, he's completing the 5-yard slant passes and drag routes and stuff.
Dak.
Yeah, right. He's never completing the 20+ yard passes down the field though. And so whenever it does happen, it's always this big thing that they have to show, look at how well Dak's doing on these passes. He's turning into this good quarterback. And then the next week he goes back to his old self and it doesn't work, and missing stuff. So. And I think the other thing for Dallas this year is that not only the offense, but I think the defense has been completely underwhelming this year for them as well, because, they made, a big point to bring DeMarcus Lawrence back on the franchise tag and all that stuff. And, he wasn't very happy. So they gave DeMarcus Lawrence a lot of money. And, Sean Lee and Leighton Vander Esch are there, and Byron Jones is a good cornerback. And they're just not performing the way they should. They're kind of not quite to the extent of this of the Jaguars, but kind of like the Jacksonville Jaguars, I want to say. The Cowboys were supposed to have this top 5 defense supposedly, and where has that been all season? So they really need to address that side of the ball too, other than just the offense. Because if they can somehow bring Dak Prescott back, or even though I know I said Winston would crash and burn if he went there, but if they can bring in Teddy Bridgewater or somebody. I think the offense is fine. Jason Witten's more than likely going to retire, but, they still have Zeke and Amari Cooper. They need to get the defense fixed, too, and fire Jason Garrett.
Yeah. All right, so I agree with pretty much what you guys have said, but I have a bigger issue with the Cowboys that goes bigger than Jason Garrett. And to me, it's Jerry Jones, because he enables this culture. And it's a culture where the Cowboys and Jason Garrett can't coach this team, because if a player has something wrong with Jason Garrett, but he's friends with Jerry Jones, he can't be disciplined, or he can't be put into place for whatever reason. And it's basically Jerry Jones is signing off on all of these signings. So giving DeMarcus Lawrence $100 million was a bad signing. Giving Zeke all this money, he extended him. He still had 2 years left on his deal, and he gave him a 5 or 6 year deal. So he's in Dallas for 8 years. He has at least $50 million guaranteed, I think, and I think the total contract is $90 million. So it's, to me, I would have never re-signed Zeke at that point, because he's got 2 years left on his deal, and if he's going to hold out, well, that's why you have next man up. And I know with Zeke, it's hard to replace that, but I don't think Zeke would have held out all that time. He had 2 years left on his deal, and he was making quite a bit of money to begin with. So, and we've seen with Todd Gurley, you don't give a running back a super max extension like that. It's never going to work out. There are going to be some exceptions to that, and I think Christian McCaffrey will be an exception to that because of his play style. But with Zeke, I think he fits in the same line as Todd Gurley, and it's all Jerry Jones's fault. Keeping Jason Garrett for as long as he did is Jerry Jones's fault. And he just does things that no other owners do. I've heard stories where he'll he'll speak to the team after the game in the locker room before the coach does. And that's what got Jimmy Johnson so mad and what drove them apart, because it's, the owners, and I know Jerry did play football, but like he didn't play it to the extent that he's like a master. He's no Michael Jordan or anything like that, where you can see, okay, Michael Jordan coming into the Hornets locker room to talk. Obviously, that makes a lot of sense. But for Jerry to do that before the head coach, I mean, he just doesn't have the football knowledge, and I think it's all his fault that this is all happening. I think he's the reason for all of their failures, and he overhypes this team every year too. Yeah, he said at the beginning of the season that this team was as talented as the Super Bowl teams, which made no sense.
Boys.
It's idiocracy. It's crazy how high these expectations are for this team, and I think it is his fault, because I think he has a hand in the play calling even too. If he likes a certain player, they're going to be favored, I think, in the play calling, because the coaches are going to be too afraid to go against whatever Jerry Jones wants. And whoever the new coach is, it's going to either end up being a guy like Jason Garrett, where you just go along for the ride and just do what Jerry says, which I don't. And I do think Jason Garrett is too vanilla. I think he's too basic of a head coach. He's not a motivator or anything, and that's the problem. The Cowboys get out to these large deficits, and then Dak Prescott has to play hero ball, and he piles up his stats in the fourth quarter, which makes it look a little bit deceiving when you see all these high QBRs and statistics and stuff. They're all coming late in the game when the team is down by 28 and they're playing soft coverage. So I think when it all comes down to it, I think Jerry Jones is the number one problem with the Cowboys, and until he either takes his hand off of football and hires a general manager and removes himself from the football aspect of it, obviously he can still have a face in the brand and all that stuff, but until he completely removes himself from the football side of things, this team is going to finish where I think they're going to finish every year, which will be 8-8 or 9-7 or whatever, around that area. And sometimes they'll make the playoffs, sometimes they won't, and they're always going to be disappointed when they're not, because they're going to hear from their owner that they're the Super Bowl caliber team when they're really not, because they can't execute, because they don't have football minds that can do their thing. So I know it's sounding like a little bit of a rant now, but I'm perfectly fine with this. I do not like the Cowboys in any way, so I really could care less. But to the Cowboy fans that are listening,
Eric.
Eric.
Yeah.
Susan, you probably would agree with me that Jerry Jones is the biggest problem with the Cowboys.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something I kind of forgot to mention too. Like, it's kind of, Jason Garrett isn't doing a great job, but I think I do kind of feel for him, because you got, your billionaire owner trying to, basically play Madden franchise mode with a real NFL team. He's really kind of making the signings, and he fails and the trades
a lot. Like, a lot of things are backfiring.
Can he join our franchise?
So I think Jerry's got to. I think he's got to swallow. If he wants the Cowboys to win a Super Bowl, he's got to swallow his pride and bring in a coach that knows what he's doing and kind of take the hands off.
Yes.
Like, let him do what he needs to do. Like, Robert Kraft does a pretty good job of that. Lets Belichick do whatever he needs to do. Kind of puts the trust in him and just steps in whenever he needs money or resources or whatever. I think Jerry Jones, I don't think he will, but if the Cowboys are going to win a Super Bowl, he's got to kind of let that happen.
I totally agree.
Well, and for me, it kind of goes to this idea too. Jerry Jones he's the owner and the GM. It kind of goes back to the situation where you can't really, like, having a head coach who's also a GM, like kind of like Bill Belichick, or I know that I'm sure there's been other examples in the past, but having a head coach as the GM too, I think that's fine. Because the head coach knows what's going on. He knows the players. He knows what he needs to make the team successful. So, that's fine. But when you've got the owner also trying to be the GM, the owner's not the one down there, who's, well, you said Jerry probably does this, but, he's not the one who's consistently drawing up the plays and coming up with a game plan and, being down there on the field with the players, like knowing the players and what they need. it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah,
I don't
no.
think. I mean, he's like the only one who's really done it, and I feel like he will be the only one who's ever done it because I don't think it will work ever.
Yes. And I think that's really what's holding the Cowboys back. They have a lot of other issues, but to me, that's the biggest one of them all. If they can overcome that and they can get either a general manager or a head coach that is also like a general manager, like you said, that works fine. If they can get that situated, I think this team has the talent to turn it around and be successful. But until that happens, they're not going to be any better than what they were this year, I believe. So we'll move on now to Antonio Brown. Connor's going to talk about him and the latest developments going on with him.
Hey, well, whereas Nate put it, Antonio Clown.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I want to talk about Antonio Brown. I mean, everybody knows I'm a Steelers fan, so I have a lot of knowledge and experience with Antonio Brown, watching him on TV a lot. And so, I mean, it's just amazing to me how a receiver like this, what he's become. Because coming into the league, Antonio Brown, he was a 6th-round draft pick, which, most of the time you see, obviously first-round draft picks tend to not work out half the time. But a lot of the times you find these like really good successes, maybe like 3rd-rounders or like late 2nd-rounders that you wouldn't think. Kind of like, Richard Sherman was like a mid-3rd-round pick and he turned into, Richard Sherman or players like that. And so, but when you look at guys like when you're drafting people in the 6th round, it's just kind of like, this guy looks okay, maybe, and we could probably use another one. So we'll just draft him. It's not going to hurt us. We're not going to pay him much money. So, but then we obviously know the story. I think it was either 5. I think it was 5 straight seasons. I think maybe I thought 6, but I think it was 5 straight seasons with at least 100 receptions. And one of those years he led the league in receptions and yards. He led the league in touchdowns at least once. And and so then all of a sudden, this is a problem for a lot of primary receivers because unfortunately wide receivers are, this is probably, I think most people would agree with me on this. Wide receivers are the biggest divas and the biggest drama queens in the NFL. I don't think any other position can even come close to matching wide receivers for how much of drama queens they are. And so, the wide receivers, they always like, I want the ball, throw me the ball. And so as soon as, and I think that was the issue for the Steelers, is that when Antonio Brown first came to the Steelers, that was when the Steelers still had Hines Ward, and people were talking about, oh, Hines Ward's like kind of regressing. But what ended up happening was, the defenses would double team Hines Ward, and that would leave Antonio Brown wide open to catch the passes, and he started getting his stats. So then Hines Ward goes and retires, and now Antonio Brown's the number 1 man, and he had success at it for a little bit. And I think what was helping him, though, is that the Steelers didn't really have any really good backup receivers for most of the time that Antonio Brown was there. I mean, Marcus Wheaton and Martavis Bryant and Sammy Coates and all these guys that were, for a season or two, but nobody was like we never had a true number 2 receiver. So then that all changes when the Steelers go and draft Juju Smith-Schuster. And now all of a sudden, obviously, like with Hines Ward, Antonio Brown is drawing all these double teams. And so, let's look to our other superstar receiver, Juju, and throw him the ball a lot. So now Juju is actually outperforming Antonio Brown in receptions and receiving yards. And now Antonio Brown's getting all pissy because he's not getting the ball thrown to him. And so normally when receivers do this, they just kind of go to another team and they kind of shut up after that. I don't know if T.O. ever really shut up, but like Chad Johnson is a good example of that. When he went to New England, he kind of shut up after he left Cincinnati. And then I can't think of any other examples right now, but they kind of just be quiet because now they're back to being the number 1 receiver. But Antonio Brown somehow just like, I know a lot of people were saying like, oh, this is probably because he's got brain damage or whatever. But I mean, he just went like psycho because after he left the Steelers, I mean, he wanted out. And, on it, when the Steelers made that trade where they got, like a 3rd rounder and a 5th rounder, and everybody was like, oh, that's like way too little for what Brown is worth. At the end of the day, the Steelers won that trade.
Yeah.
Trading Antonio Brown for a 3rd round and a 5th round pick was the winning side of that trade when it came between them and the Raiders. So, because he went to Oakland, and everybody thought, okay, if there's like one coach in this league, or maybe like one of a few coaches that's going to straighten out Antonio Brown's going to be John Gruden. John Gruden's a no-nonsense kind of coach. He's not going to put up with all the drama that Brown's going to, deal with, and he's going to get him in line, and he's going to, he's got a new relationship with Derek Carr, and everything was going fine. But then all the other stories started coming out. He got frostbite on his toes because he went into a cryo chamber without, wearing socks or whatever, or shoes. Excuse me, my voice. And then obviously the whole helmet saga. He was upset he couldn't wear his same helmet. And so eventually John Gruden didn't want to put up with it. And so he goes to New England, and this was the real thing where I was like, okay, now if there is one coach in the league that will straighten out Antonio Brown, it is Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick is the ultimate field general coach who will straighten out Antonio Brown. Well, now Antonio Brown's complaining that he can't wear his number because somebody else on the Patriots is already wearing number 84. So he's got you see in this picture right here, he's wearing number 17. But again, he's complaining about this, something very minuscule, like, oh, you didn't get your jersey number, big deal, bro. It's not that big of a deal. You should be happy to have a jersey at all, honestly. And so, he's complaining about that. And I think it was, Nate would know this better than me, but what was it, week 2 when he actually had a really decent game with the Patriots? I can't remember.
Yeah, I believe it was week 2 versus Miami. He stepped right in the offense and had 80 yards and a touchdown, I think, 7 or 8 catches.
Yeah. And so
when he went to.
Yeah.
Right.
1 week of practice and learning the playbook, he just stepped right in and
Right. And so everybody was like, okay, Antonio Brown's back to his normal self. He's going to be back to leading the league in receptions and receiving yards again. Well, then all of a sudden, more drama starts happening, and then he's out of New England and eventually out of the league. And then there was all this weird stuff going on where he was he was going to go back to college, but it was online.
Yeah.
And he was going to go back for some degree that didn't even matter or something. I'm just using English degree as an example, which wasn't that. Maybe it was, but I mean, something useless like that. Apologies to any English majors out there, but you have the most useless degree of all time. So, but yeah. So he was, like I said, going back to school. He was out of the league. And then the final kind of chapter before we getting to the present was he kept going back and forth between wanting to come back into the league and then at the same time saying screw you to the NFL. It would be on a week-to-week basis. 1 week he'd be apologizing, being oh, I'm so sorry for the way I handled things in Oakland and how I fell out with Bill Belichick, and I maybe even apologize to Ben Roethlisberger for everything that happened in Pittsburgh. But then the next week he's coming back saying stuff like, oh, screw the NFL, they're not giving me a chance, and Ben Roethlisberger, and when he was using he used a racial slur at Ben Roethlisberger, and but then the next week again he's apologizing, and then the next week after that he's like, I don't ever want to come back, I've lost my will to play football. So I mean, just so fickle with his feelings and emotions. And so now we get to the present day to where apparently he's working out with the New Orleans Saints, and from what I'm gathering, it seems like Sean Payton wants to sign him. The Saints want to sign him, but they did because they have to get info from the NFL on his eligibility at this point, because obviously he hasn't been under contract since week 3, I believe. And also, the NFL was talking about suspending him and all this other stuff. So, I mean, it's not as simple as the Marshawn Lynch situation in Seattle where they just, brought him back and signed him. This is a bit more complicated. So, I mean, if I'm going with my thoughts on is he going to get signed, it's kind of too early to tell. I think if his eligibility is if he is eligible to play, I do think the Saints are going to sign him, but I don't think he's going to do anything. I feel like it's going to be one of those, kind of just a symbolic, oh, we signed Antonio Brown. But, I mean, how much are the Saints actually? I feel like the Saints are only going to use him sparingly if they do sign him, because they already have a, top offense with Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara and Drew Brees and all these other weapons that they have. So I feel like if they do sign him, it's going to be in like a very minimalist role, and he'll maybe like come in on as like a fourth receiver, like a third receiver, like a slot receiver maybe in certain situations. But I just don't see things working out long term, even if the Saints, like if they sign him, then great for the Saints, I don't care. But I feel like it's going to be like a short term thing. It's going to be after the end of the season, that'll be it for him. He'll be out of the league again. And I don't think anybody's going to want to sign him. Like, I feel like the only reason why the Saints are doing this is because they want to, maybe they, for some reason, feel that they need, like, that extra piece to win the Super Bowl. Because the NFC is loaded. Like, one of the two between Zach and Nate mentioned this. I can't remember who said it. I think it was Zach who mentioned it. Like, the NFC is loaded this year with, even the Vikings at a wild card are 10-4 right now, or 10-5 right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the other wild card is going to be either Seattle or San Francisco, which, which will be like 13-3 or 12-4 as a wild card team. So the NFC is stacked this year. So maybe the Saints feel like they need something else to push them over the edge. But, after this season, nobody's going to want to sign him to a long-term deal because nobody wants the headaches. And I think we've mentioned this before, like when it came to Colin Kaepernick and, when, last season when nobody wanted to sign Le'Veon Bell until the Jets finally did, because nobody wants drama. Nobody wants headaches. It brings your team down. And it's, why the Jaguars got rid of Jalen Ramsey. It's why the Steelers let go of Bell and Brown. Because once you get that drama out of your locker room, it does tremendous things for your team. The Jaguars obviously were already on the downhill, but next year, without all this drama and nonsense going on, I feel like the Jaguars could do better. And honestly, with the way the Steelers' defense is playing right now, if it wasn't for the fact that Devlin Hodges was playing at quarterback, I feel like the Steelers would have been competing for the AFC North crown if they had still had Roethlisberger as their quarterback. So that's my thoughts. I think it's just a short-term thing. I don't think if he gets signed at all. I feel like it's 50-50 right now if he gets signed. But what are you guys' thoughts on if he's going to get signed and what he'll do if he does get signed?
Yeah, so back earlier when you were talking about his college trip back to college or whatever, Nate pulled up on his phone, I think, like an essay that he wrote, and we were trying to hold on to laughter.
That was I found I was kind of going back to like listen to what you were saying about the way he's been acting and like why he is the way that he is, and like I was kind of rooted for him when he first came in the league. 'Cause, like 6th round pick coming in and coming all pro is obviously a great story that anyone would like to root for. And then I kind of thought, oh, maybe he's acting this way because he finally got paid and he thinks he can do whatever he wants now. Maybe he's not hungry anymore. But then I kind of went back to, it was actually kind of ironic. He posted this scouting report when he came out of college a couple years back after he led the league in yards or whatever. And he was like, oh, this scouting report was all wrong. Like, look at me now kind of thing. And everyone, retweeted it and whatever because it was motivational. But a couple lines kind of stuck out to me. It said, has prima donna attitude and does not like to work, quote, attitude and work ethic are concerns, which, going back, it kind of give this guy some credit. Like, I think maybe he was just, this way all along, and he kind of hid it, was able to hide it a little bit because he's working for that contract from the Steelers. But I think there's something fundamentally off with this guy. Like, you read his tweets and you see all the situations going on with, no, I don't know if anyone follows him on Twitter, you can pull up his tweets. They're pretty out there, but he had he's using the hashtag no more white woman 2020 on all his tweets because his white baby mother is leaving him, and the woman who's accusing him of sexual assault, I think there's 2 of them now, are both white. So there's all this crazy erratic behavior that I don't understand how a person can, seriously act like this and take themselves seriously, when they look at themselves in the, in a mirror. I don't know how you can sit there and make a rap album called "No More White Woman 2020." I think that's a good use of time. But I don't know. I'm kind of with Connor on this one that if the Saints or somebody else does sign him, which I would be surprised if the Saints brought a element like that into their locker room at this point in the season. But I think the drama is going to come up again. I can't see him shutting his mouth and acting like a normal human being for long enough to make impact with any team. I think even if something, legally off the field, if he gets this whatever sexual assault case cleared up and can get off the commissioner's exempt list and play, I think even if he stays clear off, legally, I think he's just gonna make people mad in the locker room. He doesn't, I think going back to like the Raiders days, like I think the whole helmet point was really just to prove a point. Like he wants to get his way, kind of regardless. He doesn't care what the coach has to say. He doesn't care what the NFL has to say. Like, because the helmet doesn't really matter. Like it's, they all pretty much feel the same. Like I had a few, different helmets when I played and really couldn't tell a difference. Like I think that was more of a point saying like, oh, the NFL is saying I can't do this. I'm gonna, throw a tantrum until I get it my way. So I think I would be surprised if he comes back and is in the NFL with one team for more than half a season. So I'll let Zach kind of follow up on that.
This guy is so funny to talk about. I mean, it would take like 2 whole shows to like list every little incident that he's had because that's how many there are. So we just summarized the frostbite, the helmet, all this stuff. They're throwing the stuff off a balcony in a condo, almost killing a kid. I mean, crazy. But all this stuff it would take so much time to talk about. But we were talking also, Nate and I off air. It's like a cycle that goes on. It's like Antonio Brown cusses out the league, says, I don't need the league. The league is terrible. They're all like crackers and all this stuff. And then he'll say all this stuff and bad stuff about the league. And then the next week he'll apologize and, make up to everybody. Oh, Robert Kraft's such a great guy. Oh, Tom Brady, all this stuff. And then the next week he'll do something illegal or like there's going to be something else in the court case where he intimidated a witness or something like that. It's like, and then it goes back around and it just cycles over and over again. Some legal issue comes up, some apology to the NFL, some insult to the NFL. It just keeps cycling over and over again. This guy
getting sued by your personal chef.
Yeah, that was funny. That was another one too. This guy needs to. I think it's bigger than football. I think he needs to just fix his life. I think that's really what it comes down to. I don't think he needs to be playing football if he's got a life where he obviously can't keep his control over situations. And yeah, that's just basically what it boils down to. I mean, I could talk so much more, but as far as him being on the Saints, I think the Saints are only doing it. I don't think they expect him to play because if they do sign him, I think he'll go straight to the commissioner exempt list. And there's not really a penalty for the Saints because when you're on that list, the team doesn't have to pay him. The NFL pays him. So the Saints would kind of be just getting his rights if he were ever to come back. And I'm sure he'll be suspended when he comes back. So it's I think it's just like for the Saints, they're just trying to like keep him on ice to keep another team from getting him. And I don't know if he'll play again or not, but it's obvious he's not going to come back and play in this playoffs. That's pretty certain. So I think it's basically just that. And I think also Sean Payton too. I think he's still mad at the NFL for the way that the last season with that no call and that pass interference stuff. It was kind of like an unwritten rule between teams in the NFL, like don't even try and sign Antonio Brown, and Sean Payton's just like saying "F you NFL, I'm gonna do this." So I do think it's kind of a weird pairing between them. I think they both had their displeasures with the NFL. I mean, Sean Payton got suspended a year for Bountygate, so they both have some gripes. Maybe they can unite behind that, but I don't know if it'll happen or not. This guy I was saying I hadn't even thought about the idea that you brought up of like
maybe they're signing him to keep him away from somebody else. Because like, yeah, I'm not sure how true that is, but I mean, obviously, the who was it? The Chiefs did that with Terrell Suggs because he said like, if I come back, I will only play if the Ravens sign me. Like if somebody else picks me up, I'll sit down. So the Chiefs were like, okay, well we'll take you. Like so that way the Ravens don't have you. Like I mean, I'm not sure how true that is with Antonio Brown because I don't know if anybody else is actually looking at him. But
I don't know. I don't think he'd play this season regardless. But for future seasons, if he were to like somehow clean his act together, and I think it's a slim chance it would happen. But if he were to get right again, like then they would have his rights. Kind of like I remember a long time ago, Justin Blackman, he had a whole bunch of situations and stuff. So he was on like he was on some sort of commissioner list or something where like if he were ever to come back, then the Jags would have the rights to him, but he never made the effort to. He's kind of like Josh Gordon. They have
it's
similar
just
situations.
that the Josh Gordon saga has been going on way longer.
Yeah, but Josh Gordon, he like keeps trying to get back in the NFL whenever he gets caught. So. Whereas Blackman, I think, just said, "Screw it, I'm done with this." So
I want to smoke weed. Screw you guys.
Yeah, go down to Jamaica. I think that's where they last saw him.
Oh, wow.
So, but
the grid.
Yeah, seriously. But yeah, in the wide receiver diva thing, that's true. But this guy takes it to another level. So, and yeah, it's just too much with Antonio Brown. I'm not a fan of him. I actually blocked him on Twitter because I was tired of seeing all this stuff. So I didn't. Yeah, it is comedy, but I mean, you're kind of also fueling like a psychopath too.
Yeah.
When you look at it stuff.
It's true.
Hey, bro, if you want comedy, just look at Donald Trump's tweets. That's comedy.
I'm following him, so I see that. Yeah. So, but let us know in the comments what your prediction for Antonio Brown's going to be. We all have predictions that he's not going to. Are we all predicting he doesn't play again? Because that'd be my prediction. I don't think he's going to play again.
Yeah, that'd be my prediction. Like I feel like my prediction would be like the Saints sign him, but he doesn't play.
Yeah.
I think it's unlikely he'll ever play again. I don't know that I'd totally rule it out because if he gets, if the NFL lets him back in, I think some team next season will definitely get desperate. Like if a star receiver goes down, like I'm sure he'll get some calls. Like Josh Gordon happened, Tyreek Hill, beat up his girlfriend multiple times. He's in the NFL. Like,
that was crazy.
Someone will probably take a chance on him, but I think that's.
But I do want to say one last thing before we go, and then I'll give Connor a chance to see if he agrees with me or not. But I think Antonio Brown, while he's definitely a lot to blame, I also think the Steelers have a lot to blame with this because Mike Tomlin let him get away with all this stuff. Like I think he even said that he had different rules for Antonio Brown because he just knew he would be late to everything. So when he went to Oakland, obviously John Gruden is like, you're not going to do this. It's my way. So he had a rude awakening, but he was kind of like enabled by Pittsburgh because he was so good on the field. They were kind of like, okay, you can do what you want. And eventually it got to the point where he, didn't show up at the game. That was the final straw. But I think Pittsburgh had a lot to do with fueling his ego and all this stuff. I think if they had been a little bit harder on him from the beginning, I don't think he would have got this bad. But Connor, what do you think? Do you think they've got any blame in this?
I mean, it's interesting that you say that. Like, so I hadn't read that about him with Antonio Brown because I know the thing about Mike Tomlin is that there's been a lot of Steelers fans that have like questioned his like discipline and stuff. But I mean, that's mostly just been the Steelers fans being crybabies and wanting Mike Tomlin to get fired. So because most of the things I've heard about Mike Tomlin is that he is like, he is a fun guy. Like he likes to have fun. And, I mean, you hear clips of him sometimes when he's like hanging out and like, he likes to have fun and crack jokes and whatnot. So he's not like, Bill Belichick or John Gruden type of coach, but he still commands a lot of respect from the team. Cause I mean, he's been the head coach of the team for 12 seasons now, 12 or 13.
It's been a while.
So I mean, like, he's not one of these first year head coaches that kind of has to like get along with everybody just to get their way. Like he commands respect. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. I mean, if that was happening, then I agree that the blame does fall on Mike Tomlin for that to enable him, because it's like, oh, I can get away with that whatever I want, kind of like how the Giants never really put a leash on OBJ.
Yes.
So he's been like, getting away with stuff that he probably shouldn't have been. So, if he ever goes to a team that's not coached by not a team like the Giants or the Browns that's switching head coaches every 2 seasons, I feel like it's going to, honestly, a similar thing could happen with OBJ if that happens. So, yeah, like I said, if that was happening, then I do agree the Steelers are to blame.
Yeah, because, he did, obviously not showing up at the game was the final straw, but even before that one time he videotaped Mike Tomlin in the locker room, remember, after a game?
Yeah, I do.
That was a big no-no. Yeah, and so, to me, that's just, and he apologized, but it's a fake apology. That's all his apologies are all fake. So
he apologized because you got caught.
Yeah,
because you're actually sorry.
And what did you think? He posted it to Twitter. Of course they're gonna find out. Like, of course,
you posted for the world to see.
Yeah, like it's not like you tried to save it on your phone and release it in 10 years. But
yeah,
he's not the brightest bulb on the tree.
Yeah, no. Well, Connor, I will say, I don't know if you remember this or not, but we were talking on Facebook a long time back, and this was his last season, the beginning of his last season in Pittsburgh, and you said you were so mad at Le'Veon Bell for saying out. You were like, I want an Antonio Brown jersey. I know you're glad you didn't get that. Like you were saying how much better you like Brown than Bell and all that stuff.
Well, it was funny because he'd never had any of those issues before.
Yeah,
it was like leading up to that, it was all Le'Veon Bell, and it's funny because now, when you look at them now, I would have rather if the Steelers made an effort to hang on to Le'Veon Bell, because Le'Veon Bell has actually been pretty apologetic since then. He's been like, yeah, I mishandled it. It wasn't right.
He's a huge
and he was saying he expected the when they went to MetLife Stadium, he was like, yeah, I'm expecting the Steelers fans there to boo me, but it's kind of warranted. Yeah. I'm not going to blame them if they do. But obviously Antonio Brown's just been psycho since he left the league. So I'm glad I didn't get either of their jerseys.
Yes.
That's why, I need to get another Steelers jersey, but it's why if I do, right now, I've got a Polamalu jersey, but right now, if I get another jersey, it would be a Roethlisberger jersey, because, he's not going to have anything like that happen. He's been there forever, and he's going to retire a Steeler. So it's why I've always been so wary of getting jerseys of players that, especially superstars, because at some point, inevitably, until you get to 10 years or so in the league, you're not gonna be with that team when your career's over. So
it's a crapshoot, man.
Yeah,
it really is. And they don't really have a refund policy. That's really it's like the only way you can get a refund is if they're traded in 30 days when you bought the jersey. So.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was I thought it was pretty hilarious when I saw when I went to the NFL Hall of Fame. I will say this is the only team I saw this for. I thought I would see it more when I saw it originally, but it was the only team I saw it for. There were a lot of heavily discounted Joe Flacco Baltimore Ravens jerseys on display.
Nice.
I was like, oh man, look at that.
Yeah. Well, we're past an hour now, guys, so this is gonna wrap up the show. But yeah, so all NFL talk here. Next episode we'll probably bring some. It'll be NFL playoff time too, so we'll talk about that. But we'll hit some other sports too. We'll talk about how the college football playoff games go and the build out to the national championship. So we're back regular schedule, 2 episodes a week now. Just took a break off for Christmas, so hopefully you guys had a great Christmas too. I didn't even talk about that in the beginning, but I hope we kept in touch with some of our fans during the holidays. But hopefully everybody had a good Christmas, had a good time with family and all that stuff. So hopefully everybody's ready to start losing the weight that they gained at cookies and stuff that they ate during Christmas. But yeah, take care, guys, and have a great rest of your day.
See
ya.
For Eric, peace.